Imagine being the most powerful person in the world. You're the ruler of an empire with millions of people depending on every single decision you make. Every day, lives hang in the balance. And on top of that, enemies are trying to invade your borders. A deadly disease is killing thousands in your cities. And the people you trust most might stab you in the back. Most of us would panic, scream, or run. But Marcus Aurelius? He didn't. He stayed calm. He stayed wise. He stayed human. Marcus was born on April 26, 121 AD, in Rome. He came from a rich and a respected family, but life wasn't easy. His father died when he was very young, leaving him in the care of his grandfather and mother. They were strict, but they loved him. They taught him to work hard, to be disciplined, and to always try to be a good person. From a young age, Marcus loved to learn. He studied literature, law, history, politics, and philosophy. He found a philosophy called Stoicism, which basically says, life is messy and unfair, but you can control how you react to it. And Marcus took that to heart. Even as a kid, he wrote things in his private notes that sound almost magical. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Imagine a kid thinking like that while other children are worrying about toys or games. Marcus was different. He wasn't just smart. He was wise. He was adopted by the Emperor Antoninus Pius when he was 17 years old. Adoption might sound weird today, but in Rome, it was a way to prepare the next ruler. Marcus was being trained to take over the biggest empire in the world. And he worked harder than anyone else. He studied military strategy, leadership, politics, and how to handle people. By the time he became emperor in 161 AD, he thought he was ready. But life had a way of testing him, and it didn't wait. Almost immediately, Marcus faced disaster after disaster. There were wars at the borders, corruption in his government, and then a deadly plague that killed people by the thousands. Can you imagine being in your first year as CEO of a company and having your office on fire, your employees betraying you, and a financial crisis? That's how Marcus's first year went, but on a scale bigger than we can imagine. Most people would have quit or broken down. Marcus didn't. He reminded himself to focus only on what he could control and to let go of the rest. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Life's obstacles weren't stopping him. They were his path. Marcus didn't just sit in Rome and give orders. He went to the front lines. The Germanic tribes along the Danube River were invading, and Marcus led his soldiers into battle himself. He didn't sit safely in a palace while others fought. He slept in tents, endured cold and hunger, and faced danger head-on. That's leadership. That's courage. That's virtue. Even with all his power, Marcus faced pain and loss that would crush any normal person. He lost many of his children. He was betrayed by people he trusted. He lived under constant stress and impossible decisions. But he never gave up. He wrote private notes to himself, reminding himself to be patient, to be fair, and to keep learning. These notes became meditations. One of his most famous lines was, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." He wasn't talking to anyone else. He was talking to himself. Every day, he had to convince himself to be better, to stay strong, to stay human. Marcus's teachings aren't just old philosophy, they're survival tools. He teaches us that life will throw problems at us always. People will be cruel. Things will go wrong. Life will feel unfair. But the real power comes from how you respond. Control your thoughts. Control your actions. Accept what you cannot change. And above all, try to be good no matter what. He also teaches us about death. The plague reminded him every day that life is fragile. Death comes for everyone, no matter how rich, powerful, or famous. Marcus didn't fear it. He accepted it. He said, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." Even when Rome was falling apart around him, he focused on doing the right thing. But Marcus wasn't a robot. He felt pain. He got frustrated. He lost loved ones. He faced betrayal. And yet, he didn't let emotions control him. He constantly reminded himself that the only thing he could truly control was his mind. That's it. Not wealth, not armies, not titles, just his thoughts. His life also shows us the power of example. He lived simply, didn't chase luxury, and treated people with fairness. He didn't demand respect. He earned it by how he acted. That's why we still remember him today. That's why his words still matter. He shows us that true greatness doesn't come from money or power. It comes from mastering yourself. So, the next time life feels overwhelming, when it feels like everything is crashing down, think like Marcus Aurelius. Ask yourself, what can I control? What must I accept? How can I act with virtue? Lead yourself first. Control your thoughts. Focus on your actions. Happiness doesn't come from the world around you. It comes from your mind. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He didn't just rule Rome. He ruled himself. And if we follow his example, maybe we can all find a little bit of that emperor inside us. Marcus Aurelius' story is more than history. It's a guide, a mirror, and a challenge. Life is messy, unfair, and painful. But it is also a chance to rise above, to be brave, to be wise, to be good. That is the legacy of the philosopher emperor, and that is the lesson we carry forward, even today. But Marcus Aurelius' life wasn't just about battles, loss, and wisdom. It was also about the small, quiet moments where his character truly shone. Imagine him sitting alone at night in a dimly lit tent, the sounds of soldiers snoring around him, and the faint glow of a candle on his face. While most men would have been consumed by fear, grief, or anger, Marcus quietly wrote in his journal, reminding himself of what mattered. He reflected on how fleeting life is, how small human pride really is, and how important it is to act rightly in every moment. In those private writings, he poured out everything he felt: the frustration at betrayal, the sadness of losing a child, the exhaustion from endless wars, but always with a guiding thought: how can I be better tomorrow? And here's the thing, Marcus wasn't perfect. He knew that. He admitted in his notes. He struggled with anger sometimes. He admitted he could be impatient or weak. Yet, instead of letting those flaws define him, he confronted them. That's what makes him relatable even today. He wasn't some untouchable figure on a throne.
He was a man trying, every day, to be a better version of himself, even when the whole world was trying to break him.
His philosophy also guided how he treated other people. Imagine being surrounded by senators, generals, and advisors, many of whom were selfish, greedy, or cruel. Most rulers might have lashed out, punished them unfairly, or let their temper take over. But Marcus looked at people through the lens of Stoicism. He reminded himself that others act out of ignorance, fear, or weakness. He didn't have to like them, and he didn't have to approve of their actions, but he could choose how he responded. With patience, with fairness, with virtue. That's why even enemies admired him, and why history remembers him as not just a strong leader, but a wise one. And then there were the wars. Oh, the wars! The Marcomannic Wars along the Danube were brutal. Tribes were invading Roman lands constantly, and entire towns were being destroyed. Marcus didn't just issue orders from Rome. He rode alongside his soldiers, sometimes for months at a time. He shared their hardships, sleeping on hard ground, eating cold rations and enduring relentless cold and rain. Can you imagine that? The emperor, the most powerful man in the world, living like a common soldier, yet carrying the weight of an entire empire on his shoulders? That takes a kind of strength that's almost unimaginable today. Yet Marcus faced every challenge with the same calm, reflective mind he had cultivated since childhood. Even in the middle of chaos, he never lost his humanity. He remembered the people he ruled. He understood their fears, their hopes, their suffering. He didn't see them as mere subjects or numbers on a scroll. To Marcus, they were human beings, each one deserving of fairness and justice. And that's what set him apart from so many rulers before and after him. Power didn't corrupt him, it tested him. And he chose to respond with wisdom, not cruelty. But life still tested him in the most personal ways. He lost children one after another, each loss like a knife to his heart. And yet he continued. He didn't retreat into despair. He didn't give up on being a father, a leader, or a man of virtue. Instead, he reflected, wrote, and reminded himself that grief is natural, but life must go on. That balance between feeling deeply and acting rightly, that is the essence of Marcus Aurelius. And his lessons are not just ancient history, they are alive today. Because, think about it, we all face challenges. Maybe not invasions or plagues, but bills, heartbreak, stress, betrayal. Life still tests us. And like Marcus, we have a choice. We can let it overwhelm us, or we can control our minds, act with virtue, and rise above. That is his gift to us, a roadmap for strength, courage, and wisdom that doesn't age, no matter the century. Even in the quietest moments, Marcus Aurelius's mind was alive with reflection. He thought about virtue, about kindness, about mortality, about how to live a life that mattered. Not for power, glory, or wealth, but for the right reasons. Imagine having the entire empire in your hands and still taking the time each day to think about what it means to live well. That is extraordinary. That is the mark of a true philosopher emperor. Even with all his wisdom and strength, Marcus Aurelius was never immune to doubt. Imagine being surrounded by power and expectation every day. People whispering in corridors, generals questioning your orders, advisors plotting in shadows. And at the same time, soldiers dying on the front lines, cities trembling under disease, and the empire itself stretching thinner with each passing year. Most people would feel crushed, paralyzed, maybe even hopeless. But Marcus didn't let that happen. He reminded himself constantly, you have power over your mind. Not events, not people, only your mind. And he truly lived by that principle. There are stories of him walking among the people of Rome during the plague, quietly observing, quietly helping. He didn't hide behind palace walls. He saw their fear, their pain, and their confusion. But instead of panicking, he stayed calm, acted wisely, and led with reason. That is remarkable. Not because he ruled an empire, but because he treated every human life with respect and dignity, even when the world was falling apart. Marcus's personal philosophy extended to everything he did. He didn't chase luxury or indulgence like many rulers before him. While others built opulent palaces, threw extravagant parties, and sought personal glory, Marcus chose simplicity. He focused on learning, reflecting, and practicing virtue. He believed that happiness didn't come from wealth, power, or praise. It came from living rightly and mastering yourself. Even small things mattered to him. He would remind himself to be patient with the smallest irritations, to act with fairness in every decision, and to remember that every day was an opportunity to practice virtue. And then there were the battles. The Marco-Manic Wars were not just conflicts, they were a constant test of his leadership, courage, and endurance. Marcus didn't just command armies from a distance, he endured everything his soldiers endured. Rain soaked him, hunger gnawed at him, exhaustion threatened to break him. And yet he pushed on. He led by example. He didn't expect bravery from his men if he wasn't brave himself, and through it all, he kept a Stoic mindset, reminding himself that obstacles were not punishments, they were opportunities to prove courage and wisdom. But the true depth of Marcus Aurelius's character shines most in his private reflections. He was painfully aware of human frailty, not just in others, but in himself. He wrote about anger, frustration, and sadness. He admitted to feeling fear, doubt, and grief. And yet he faced these emotions honestly, rather than pretending they didn't exist. He trained his mind to respond thoughtfully, rather than react impulsively. That struggle, this daily effort to be better, kinder, stronger, wiser, is what makes him relatable. Even today, we can feel his presence as if he's whispering, yes, life is hard. Yes, people are cruel. Yes, you will fail. But you can rise. You can be better. Marcus also understood mortality in a way that most people cannot. The plague during his reign was devastating, killing thousands. Entire cities were emptied. Yet he didn't fear death. He accepted it as part of life. He wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." That acceptance of life's impermanence made him both humble and powerful. He knew that he could not control everything in the world, but he could always control himself. Even as his children died, even as enemies plotted against him, even as war and disease raged, Marcus found moments of peace and reflection. He meditated on life, on virtue, and what it meant to be human. He practiced gratitude for what he had, resilience for what he faced, and courage for what he must do.
These were not empty words, they were lived experiences. And that is why his meditations continue to resonate today. They are not philosophy books, they are survival manuals, written by a man who faced the worst life could throw at him and refused to be broken.
Think about your daily life for a moment. The endless notifications, the constant pressure at work or school, the arguments with friends or family, the moments when you feel stuck, frustrated, or powerless. Marcus Aurelius would tell you that all of these are opportunities, not punishments, and that the true power lies in how you respond, not in changing the world around you. For instance, when someone criticizes you online or at work, instead of reacting angrily or sulking, you can pause and remind yourself that their words do not define you, that only your response matters, and that even in conflict, you can choose patience, clarity, and calm, turning a moment of irritation into a practice of self-mastery. When you face failure, maybe a business idea flops, a presentation goes wrong, or a personal goal isn't met, Marcus would say, "See this as training. Obstacles are the way." You can apply this by analyzing what went wrong, learning from it, and using it to grow stronger, smarter, and more resilient, rather than letting disappointment or fear of failure stop you from trying again. When life feels chaotic, overwhelming, or unfair, like a global pandemic, a financial setback, or the unpredictability of relationships, Marcus teaches us to focus on the small things that are under our control, our habits, our routines, our mindset, and our actions, because even in a storm, controlling your own ship keeps you from being completely lost at sea. He also urges us to practice daily reflection and gratitude, even in small ways, maybe writing a short journal, meditating for a few minutes, or simply pausing to think about the people, opportunities, and skills we have. Because awareness of what is valuable in our lives cultivates peace, focus, and clarity amidst chaos. And perhaps most importantly, Marcus reminds us to live in the present, to stop waiting for perfect conditions, to act now on the things that matter, whether that's learning a skill, connecting with someone we care about, or taking steps toward a dream. Because time is fleeting, distractions are endless, and the only real moment we ever have is the one in front of us. And if we embrace this mindset, we begin to see life not as a series of problems to complain about, but as a canvas of opportunities to practice courage, wisdom, and virtue, proving that the lessons of a Roman emperor 2 millennia ago are not dusty philosophical relics. They are living, breathing tools that can help us navigate the challenges, pressures, and uncertainties of modern life with dignity, focus, and unshakable strength. Even though Marcus lived nearly 2,000 years ago, his wisdom is shockingly relevant today because the storms he faced, stress, betrayal, fear, loss, aren't all that different from what we face now. And his teachings can be applied in ways that make modern life not just survivable, but meaningful. For example, he constantly reminded himself to focus only on what he could control. And in today's world, that could mean not obsessing over other people's opinions, social media comparisons, or things outside our influence, but instead putting energy into our actions, our decisions, our thoughts. Because controlling the outside world is impossible, but controlling ourselves is always within reach. He also taught the power of perspective, reminding himself that obstacles are not enemies, but opportunities, which in modern life could mean seeing failure, criticism, or setbacks not as punishments, but as tools to grow, to learn, to get stronger. So the next time a project fails, a client walks away, or a friend betrays trust, instead of sinking into anger or despair, we can pause, reflect,
and ask, "What can I take from this?" He emphasized virtue over recognition, meaning that even when no one is watching, we should act with honesty, integrity, and kindness, which today could be as simple as doing the right thing at work, helping someone without expecting a thank you, or standing up for what is fair, even if it's uncomfortable. Marcus also understood mortality and impermanence, reminding himself that life is short and fragile, which in our lives could inspire us to prioritize what truly matters: relationships, growth, learning, and contribution, rather than chasing endless distractions, pointless arguments, or shallow pleasure. He practiced gratitude and reflection daily, something we can replicate by journaling, meditating, or taking quiet moments to think about what we did well, what we can improve, and what we are thankful for. He controlled his emotions, understanding that anger, fear, and resentment are choices. And in our fast-paced world, that could mean pausing before reacting to a heated message, a rude comment, or stressful news, choosing reason and calm instead. Finally, he constantly reminded himself to act now, because procrastination and excuses waste life, which today can push us to start that side project, speak to that person, work on that skill, or pursue that goal, without waiting for the perfect moment. Because Marcus knew and teaches us that time is fleeting, obstacles are inevitable, but the way we respond defines who we are and shapes our destiny. And if we embrace even a fraction of his discipline, his perspective, and his philosophy in our daily lives, we too can face challenges with calm, grow through adversity, and live a life of meaning, resilience, and quiet power, proving that the lessons of a Roman emperor are not locked in history, but alive and ready to guide us through the storms of the modern world.